A century ago, this civilization stood on the brink of starvation. It wasn't a temporary crisis or just a bad harvest. Humanity had hit a wall it couldn't break through. I look at this city. Millions of windows, billions of people. They open their refrigerators, never giving a second thought to the fact that once, all of this was impossible. But at the dawn of the 20th century, the math was different. 1 billion people. That was the absolute limit. More people meant more fields. More fields meant bleeding the earth dry. But the earth couldn't give endlessly. And yet, the impossible happened. The population didn't stop. It multiplied by 8. I had to find the exact moment they broke the rules. It wasn't new lands, not machines, not blind luck. Something allowed them to pull more food from this planet than it was capable of giving. I started with the dirt, because that's where all food began. Every stalk of wheat, every harvest, every civilization. I looked at old farmers' logs, at the charts of plummeting crop yields. The deeper I dug into those fields, the clearer the crime scene became. They were robbing themselves. People hauled the grain into the cities and ate it. What was supposed to rot and return to the soil vanished forever. Man had severed the natural cycle, building a system designed only to extract. The earth was turning into barren dust. Crops refused to grow. Something was missing. But back then, they didn't know exactly what they were looking for. They only knew one thing. The soil had to be fed. And so, the madness began. I pulled the archives from the 19th century. They sought salvation in the darkest places. They went to the graveyards, Waterloo, Leipzig, ancient mass graves. They dug up the battlefields of great wars. The remains of thousands of soldiers were ground into dust, loaded onto ships, and scattered across the fields of England. They tried to make death feed life. But the dead couldn't sustain the living. The bones ran out too fast. Then they cast their gaze across the ocean. Islands off the coast of Peru. White cliffs made entirely of dried bird shit. Guano. They realized this reeking mass made wheat grow like magic. It was like a gold rush. They sent thousands of slaves to hack away at those cliffs with pickaxes. They even started killing each other for it. The War of the Pacific. Entire nations slitting each other's throats for the right to control piles of shit at the edge of the world. Because life was in it. But this resource, too, was finite. The mountains of guano were vanishing. I looked at these desperate attempts and saw nothing but a stay of execution. Every war, every desecrated grave brought me back to a single question. What were they looking for? I dissected the very mechanics of starvation. I took a dead plant and looked at exactly what it lacked. The sun was there. The water was there. The carbon was there. But a plant is a factory. It has to catch the light and turn it into flesh, into protein. For that factory to run, it needs green blood, chlorophyll. And to build chlorophyll, it needs a specific molecular knot, a linchpin. Without it, the factory stalls. The plant starves to death, drowning in water and sunlight. The wheat stalk becomes an empty decoration. That same linchpin holds together the spiral of DNA. It builds every muscle in the body of whoever eats that bread. They weren't just stripping the fields of dirt. They were draining the chemical scaffolding that keeps life from falling apart. And when it ran out, they started slitting throats for bird shit and old bones. Because the scaffolding was in there. I found it in the formulas. Nitrogen. The reserves of this element were running dry. Scientists were already writing the obituary for this world, calculating the exact year the global famine would begin. But I look out the window and see the lights of a megalopolis. That means they found a way out. Where did they find a new source? They were hunting for nitrogen where there was barely any left, forgetting that the gas hadn't vanished from the planet. I looked at the composition of this world and realized the cruel irony. There was more of it than any other element around them. 78% of the atmosphere. It was right above their heads, an endless ocean. But nature had put a lock on it. In the air, nitrogen existed in a dead state. 2 atoms welded shut. Billions of tons of the resource floated all around them, but no plant could crack that armor. They were dying of thirst in the middle of a freshwater lake because they didn't know how to drink. And then, man decided to hack nature and do it himself. I found the blueprints. Early 20th century, they built steel towers that looked like the altars of a new god. Inside, they engineered monstrous pressure and heat. They literally tortured the air, forcing it through red-hot metal until the molecules broke. They forced the atmosphere to become fertilizer, liquid ammonia, bred from thin air. It was a triumph. The world changed forever. 1 billion became 8. They learned to squeeze life out of the planet by pulling it straight from the sky. But my investigation wasn't over. Every piece of technology casts a shadow. I looked at the factories pumping life out of the atmosphere and checked their logs during the Great Wars. The exact same process. The exact same ammonia. You need nitrogen to grow wheat, but you also need it to make gunpowder and high explosives. The very thing that saved them from starving, loaded their guns. The machines that gave humanity its daily bread spent those same years churning out millions of tons of death. Out of a single pipe came 2 things, life and destruction. I look at this city. They walk the streets thinking they've beaten the laws of the universe. But the truth is different. They didn't become independent. They built a civilization around a giant machine, an artificial lung, pumping their food out of the void. Shut down those steel towers, and this entire modern world collapses in a matter of months. The Earth wouldn't be able to feed even a fraction of those living on it. I went looking for the reason humanity survived. I didn't just find salvation. I found an addiction. Nitrogen.